George W. Bush, one of the most colorful and charismatic presidents, turns 76 today. He was commander-in-chief from 2001 to 2009, leading America during the very troubled period of the 9/11 attacks, wars with Afghanistan and Iraq, and the 2008 banking collapse.
He continued his colorful lifestyle as a painter and hasn't disappeared from the public eye. To talk about GWB's life and legacy, let's bring in former Bush administration official and the host of America Right Now, Tom Basile. Tom, good morning.
Good morning. Good to be with you, especially on this day where we're celebrating our 43rd president.
I know. Happy birthday to him. So what was it like working alongside our 43rd president?
You know, one of the things that really tests the mettle of a person is what they do and the way they act when the cameras are off. And, you know, when I was on the campaign with him in 1999, we were in New Hampshire outside of a Howard Johnson's, and he was editing a speech with Karen Hughes. And it was one of the first times I really saw him in action, saw the man. And he was editing a speech, and he looked at the line and he said, "I don't want to say it that way. I don't want to say that." And he kind of got into it a little bit with Karen, and he looked at her and he said, "Look, if people don't like me for who I am, I'll just go home to Laura." And that was with nobody around. So this was somebody that when we worked for him, he was very comfortable in his skin. He was somebody who was very resolute. He knew who he was. He understood that the presidency was bigger than just one man, that it was about the country. And he was somebody who, again, was very compassionate, and I think really started the evolution of the Republican Party away from being the guy on the monopoly board to a party that is far more populist. And I think that Donald Trump has picked that up in many respects, and we're seeing the Republican Party now reach corners and aspects of our politics that ordinarily we wouldn't prior to Bush's presidency.
Yeah, Tom, I love how you said you really get to know a president when you get to know the man. You have a really, really poignant story to share about your time with President Bush during that horrible, those days right after 9/11. Share that with us.
Well, there are a lot of different stories, but I was with him when he went to Baghdad in 2003 and surprised the troops for Thanksgiving. And he literally hugged every single person in that room. He thanked every person in that room. He loved being with people. This was a person who smiled very easily, but he would laugh with you and he would cry with you. He had a way of reaching out and grabbing folks that made him very relatable, even though he was the son of a former president. And I think that was one of the things that made him very, very likable and gave him the appeal that he had. And resiliency. I think that he drew a lot of strength, particularly after 9/11, from people. Right after 9/11, I was there when he first met Governor George Pataki and Mayor Giuliani at the steps of Air Force One on his way to New York, and those embraces and those expressions of support were very genuine. It wasn't political.
Yeah, Tom, one of the things that Bush, he doesn't get a lot of attention or credit for were his appointments of Justices Alito and Roberts, which helped ensure the court's conservative direction. Why do you think that is?
Well, look, it's been 22 years since George W. Bush won the presidency. We don't think about it that way, but it has been that long, and so much has changed. There's so much more noise, and politics has changed so much in this country. But the Dobbs decision is part of George W. Bush's legacy, as it's part of Donald Trump's legacy. Because of the Alito appointment. He also appointed Justice Roberts, and while his role on the court is different, he's clearly one of the folks who helped guide the court in a more conservative direction over time.